For problem 3, the answer is going to be B. So again, if you got that right, you can just skip forward in the video to the next problem. But to get this answer, so this time we're asked to find, excuse me, f prime of 4. So we need to first find the derivative of f, and then we need to plug 4 into the derivative. So if I find the derivative, I have the square root of x going in for t, so I have the square root of x squared. And then I need to multiply by the derivative of the square root of x. So remember, the square root of x is x to the 1/2. So its derivative would be 1/2 x to the negative 1/2. So that's what I'll multiply here. So 1/2 x to the negative 1/2. This simplifies, so I have cosine of x times 1/2 times x to the negative 1/2 is 1 over root x. If we plug, what do we plug in? If we plug in 4, so if I plug in 4 for x, I have cosine of 4 times 1/2 times 1 over root 4. And that is going to simplify to the answer B. 1/2 times 1 over root 4 is just 4. So the answer for number 3 is B. On number 5, this is going to be, or sorry, number 4. Number 4, the answer is going to be C. And this one's going to be a little different. So we want to know where f is increasing. And we know that f is increasing wherever its derivative is greater than 0. So first we need to find the derivative. On this, the function up top is just x. So that means I get to just plug in x for t. And this is something we need our calculator for. And if you look at the answers, hopefully we can see that calculators are necessary. So grab your calculator and graph this function. Make sure that you are in radians instead of degrees. And when you first graph it, it looks kind of crazy if you're on a standard window. It's just kind of like it looks a little nuts. So make sure you might want to change the window. This is only going from 0 to pi. So you might want to change your window to 0 to pi. And then when you graph it, it looks a little bit smoother. Kind of goes like this a little bit. So if we want to know where f is increasing, I want to know where this derivative is positive. This derivative is positive, it looks like kind of right in here. And we can use the calc menu, we can use the find 0 function to get those values for x. And it's going to give us this answer C. And questions like this are pretty common on the calculator section of the exam. I don't really know how the exam is going to look on this year's version, but hopefully next week we're going to get more information from College Board. So to recap, we wanted to find where f was increasing. We find where f is increasing by looking for where the derivative is positive. So we find the derivative, we graph it, and we look for where this is positive. And to get these values of x, you're going to want in your calculator to go into the calculate menu and then choose 0. And that'll help you find those two numbers. On number 5, so again, if you want to try the problem first, make sure you always press pause before I say the answer. But for number 5, the answer is B, 1/2. And to get that, so we want to know f prime of 4. So first I need to find f prime of x, and then I need to plug 4 into it. So I need g of root x, because we plug this in for t. So I have g of root x times the derivative of root x, and I said that on the last screen. It's 1/2 x to the negative 1/2. So now we need to find f prime of 4 So I have g of root 4 times 1/2, and this we did before, 1/2 times 1 over root 4. G of root 4 is g of 2. And g of 2, if I look at the graph, g of 2 is 2. And that's how we get 1/2. For number 6, this question took me a lot more space. This problem took me a lot more space than I thought I was going to need at first, but the answer for number 6 is A. And to do it, so this time we're looking for the second derivative at 1. If we find the first derivative, so the first derivative, f prime, is going to be the square root, and I plug x squared in for t, so x squared squared, I have x to the 4th plus 3 over 2 times x squared, and then I need to multiply by the derivative of x squared, which is 2x. If we simplify, because the 2x squared and the 2x are going to reduce, if we simplify, that's root x to the 4th plus 3 all over x. So this is my first derivative, but unfortunately we don't want the first derivative. We want the second derivative. And to find that, now I'm going to use the quotient rule. So x to the 4th plus 3 under a square root, so that's x to the 4th plus 3 to the 1/2 all over x. And we are going to use the quotient rule to find the derivative. I am going to give myself some more space by shrinking this and moving it over. So using the quotient rule, we're going to have low d high. To do the derivative of the numerator, we need quotient rule, or I'm sorry, we need chain rule. -1/2 times the derivative of the inside minus high d low. The derivative of the denominator is just 1 because it's x. So then I have just x to the 4th plus 3 to the 1/2. This is all over x squared. We can plug in 1 now instead of simplifying it because it makes it, I think, a little bit easier. So I have 1 times 1/2. 1 to the 4th plus 3 is 4. 4 minus, and then 1 times 4 to the 1/2. All over 1 squared is just 1. So working with this numerator, 4 to the negative 1/2 is 1/2. 4 to the 1/2 is 2, because that's the square root of 4. And for this, 1/2 times 1/2 times 4 is 1. And then 1 minus 2 is -1.